Hey, everybody. I'm Jay Scherr with Jay Scherr Business Consulting. We help entrepreneurs, business owners, and other leaders maximize their potential, build rock solid foundations for their businesses, and create more freedom in their lives. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Steve Jobs said, "The only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle." On today's episode, we talk about attracting work you love, creating success without sacrifice or compromise, why mindset matters, and more. My guest is a husband and father and a serial entrepreneur. This former headhunter, who in 2008 decided to make a change and start a new company, has helped more than 16,000 high achievers land six-figure jobs they love. He's a coach, thought partner, and trusted advisor. His work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Business Insider, Fast Company, and other media outlets. Please welcome the man who's helping us define success on our own terms, Kevin Kermes. Kevin, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
It is,
Been looking forward to this conversation.
as am I. So let's dive right in. I
Sure.
thought a good starting point for us would be for you to share a bit about your backstory. So let's wind the clock back before the entrepreneurial journey. And I'd love it if you would share with us maybe one or two key lessons that you've learned along the way that have helped shape the person who you are today.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that. When I think about my journey through the lens of both personal and professional, because I think it's difficult for me to compartmentalize the two, right? They bleed into one another, and candidly, I think we run into a lot of issues when we try to compartmentalize both those things, or a lot of challenges we create for ourselves. There have been a few waypoints in my career where I realized that I was at a crossroads, right? What some people might call a pivot. At certain points in our lives, we call midlife crisis. Others may call an existential crisis, whatever. I kind of soften that language. They're just points at which you can kind of step back and examine and look for the new path. One of those happened in college when I realized that I did not want to go the corporate route that everybody else wanted to go, or most people wanted to go. I wanted to join the military. I wanted to serve as an infantry officer. It's a great choice. It was a super impactful one for me. I also realized after close to 4 years of service that it was not lining up with some of the things that I wanted to do and how I wanted to show up as a father and a husband. Um, and it is important for me to pause here, and anyone who is serving to know that there's no judgment there. Just for me, I knew that I was not showing up as the highest and best version of myself as an infantry officer, and that is exactly what everybody that you're leading deserves and requires. And I knew I was not providing that any longer. So shifted into what became a career in headhunting. One of the lessons that I learned at that point, and that inflection point, was that it was less of a pivot than it was looking less tactically and more strategically at the things that I had been doing and where I'd been thriving in the Army, and finding new conditions, new opportunities where I could apply those things. And one of the most powerful things that I learned was I wrote my first resume and put down all the cool guy stuff I thought I did and all the things that people would really love. And I then went and talked to bosses that I worked for and asked a really simple question of, when you think of me, what do you think of? Following that up with, when you ran into X problem, what was the thing that or what was the catalyst? What was the situation where you said, "Oh, I'll call Kevin. Kevin will take care of this." Wouldn't bat an eye, squared away. I know he's got this covered. And what I realized through those conversations is that those were the things. And when I kind of took a step back and I looked at, as I had 4 different bosses, and then I looked at the bosses that I really enjoyed working with and why did I enjoy working with them. And these are the problems I solve for them. And this is where I provided value. I'm looking for similar sets or one-offs from that. The headhunting moved forward. I had some great opportunities at an international search firm I was at. So that was lesson 1, or maybe there are 2 lessons in there. As a headhunter, I came to realize very quickly I was given a great opportunity to come into a market that was at the bottom out of about 200 offices. I think we were ranked either number 1 or number 2 at the bottom, so either 199 or 200, and get them within a year to the top. It's been a while, so it was either the top 4, top 5 worldwide, pound for pound, meaning per desk. So it was a small office in Baltimore where there were 3 of us. We were never going to compete on total revenue against a New York or a Chicago, but individually we were in the top 4 or 5 worldwide.
So I want to push pause for just a moment because a couple of questions come to mind.
Sure.
And we're going to come back to this timeline because you're sharing some great information and some lessons learned that I think are very valuable. The first question, to stay relevant on the point that you just made about starting off when you first went to work for this company, being basically at the bottom of the rank, and then being able to see a significant increase to becoming the top 4 to 5 in the world. That's a pretty remarkable change. If you look back now and try to identify at least 2 to 3 of the big changes that were made, the most significant actions that were taken, what do you point to? What do you think about there?
The one that immediately comes to mind was developing partnerships, which essentially were channels for business development and sales opportunities. It was interesting. I cut my teeth on headhunting in Philadelphia, and I was in an office that was very established. There was one guy who had been there 13 years, another guy who was one of the top performers in the company had been there 5 or 6 years. We had a small territory. Philadelphia also had some challenges from a tax standpoint on getting new businesses in, much less than the taxes. They were applying a city tax that applied if you worked in the city. So there wasn't a lot of new business that was coming into the city, new businesses that were coming into the city, and it was difficult to get candidates to come in as a headhunter. Territory set up, all these things. So I learned to get really, really resourceful. And the training program I had gone through was kind of, here's your phone and figure it out. So no disrespect to the guys who hired me.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate to that sales program.
Particularly in sales. Let's face it, we're not known for our leadership and our development as much as let's promote the guy who is the best at sales. So, okay. Nonetheless, so within a year, did really well there. Was one of the top rookies. I don't know where I stack ranked, but I was doing all right. And in coming to Baltimore, which is where I was asked to move to, I come in and I find this office sitting in a city that has all of these satellite offices around that are doing temporary staffing. We were doing executive search, and there was no relationship. There was this very, very cantankerous relationship with these offices that are full of people who are doing temporary staffing, which is just like outbound calling all day long. And I walked into these places and there were 5 offices. I think there were 5 that were around us. And I'm like, guys, you got people sitting here who are making all these outbound calls all day long. And there's a financial incentive for them to refer people over to you. You could literally, I'm sitting here looking at this going, I could sit back and never pick up the phone and just take the referrals that come in and have warm conversations all day long. And once I got that turned around with the people who were on the team, all of a sudden things just started opening up right and left. I was fortunate that there was one woman in particular working in one of these offices who had been up in Connecticut, I believe. And Angela and I sat down because we had been in offices where we watched how this worked. And I was like, hey, we've got an awesome opportunity here for like both of us can make a ton of money, have a ton of impact for our clients, and show other people how this works. And we did. So the big lesson there for me was, and this is something I've carried forward in every business, is there's certainly the first level, first cut on how to execute, but looking at where money, opportunities, all those things reside inside a business, that if you just get caught up in the way, quote, things are done or have been done, you may miss. I've gone through that process in my business in the last year and a half, 2 years, totally missing things. And now when I pan out, I think about the business, the service, the opportunity as a big pie, and that there's this really small sliver of what I'm aware of, and that there's a ton of other things in there from a value standpoint that I more than likely can't see. And it just presents an opportunity to constantly be curious about what else am I missing.
So let's talk about that zooming out process and following curiosity and understanding the realization that we only see that one slice of the pie, yet when we get greater perspective, things look very different. So for you and what you've learned and the businesses that you've been involved in, the businesses that you've started and those that you exited, what does that process look like? And walk our audience through maybe some tactical things that they can do within their own businesses or their own lives to be able to zoom out and get that kind of perspective that you've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, so I wish I could admit that I have a rock solid 6-step process to this, but maybe in the course of this we can kind of develop one out of this. So when I think back to how this realization came about, it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, with one of my businesses where I was reaching a point where I didn't know that I necessarily wanted to, quote, do it anymore, do what we had been doing. Which is a whole other separate conversation of panning away from how things were done. And maybe if you do it differently, or better yet, you show up differently in it, you could have an entirely different experience with it. That's the next phase of the operation that we're currently in. But prior to that, it brought me to starting to have some conversations with some business brokers. And I was fascinated by the valuations that I was getting. And what the valuations immediately told me was these valuations are coming at this and seeing something very different than I'm seeing, because I'm expecting the number to be different. And as I dug into it and started asking questions, where I wasn't getting honest or totally transparent answers, I realized that where I was looking at the value, they may or may not be seeing that value, but there were other things that they were seeing value in. So now that caused me to go out and just start having conversations with people and get curious and come less from a perspective of, let me explain to you what we do and how we do it, and here's what we generate, like getting into kind of pitch mode, like not pitch mode at all. I'm like, hey, I got this thing, and I started with friends. So started with guys who were financial advisors, starting with other business owners, other people who had been in more of an information-based business, other people who have been in coaching businesses. And I'm like, I'm just curious where you see value and why. And it started opening up me looking at things that otherwise I didn't, I just had never considered before, because I was so myopic on, we've got a coaching business. We need to have calls to determine who the people are that are the right enrollment. We need to have a funnel to be able to get these people. So we're running ads that are creating these opportunities to have conversations, to then through that determine who's going to be a good fit for us, who isn't. How do we, just like the efficiency, getting so dialed in on the efficiency of that process, and not realizing that there were some other choices that could be made. And what I mean by that is a blessing and a curse is we worked with a consultant to help us create this system. And it was a great system. It's a phenomenal system. We helped a tremendous amount of people. What I also started to realize was that this system sort of became kind of like dogma, because there were certain parts of it in the way it was being talked about, particularly like with sales. One of the messages that we would consistently get through sales was, this sales process is one of the hardest sales processes in the world, and it's really difficult to master and to execute, and it requires lifelong commitment and blah 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 blah. Right? So we were constantly having turnover with salespeople, and one day I kind of just panned out a little bit, and I'm like, well, it's really hard for a fish to climb a tree. It's not difficult. Like, we've got coaches over here who love what they're doing and they're thriving. Like, I don't understand, who is best? The question I came up with was, who is best served by this narrative that the sales thing is just so enormously difficult? I was like, oh, the guy who's glad to keep helping us through the process with the check coming in it. And again, like, not maligning coaches, not maligning none of that. I was like, this is the my first thought was, why in the world did I not see this sooner? Oh my gosh, this is not my first foray into sales. And for me, I feel like I was so caught up in like just looking at the entire process and trying to get it dialed in, that I was just starting to accept that this is just how it is. Which is, as I say that out loud, I'm like, oh my gosh, man. Like, if anybody else said that to me, I'd go, hold on. Probably the most powerful or disempowering decision you could make and or say out loud. Talk about the antithesis of an affirmation, that this is just how it is, and accept that as written law.
It's so interesting though, as I hear you telling this story and coming to this realization, and then asking yourself the question, why didn't I come up with this sooner? Or why didn't I see this sooner? That is so relatable in so many other areas. I mean, there's been so many moments where I've experienced the same thing. And I think what I'm hearing throughout this, the common thread as you're telling this story, is around asking better questions.
100%.
Constantly asking those questions and not necessarily accepting something on face value, but maintaining almost that childlike curiosity. Why are we doing this way? Can we do it a different way? Can we look at a different tool or a different way, a different process that may lead to a different result? Things like that, using the Socratic method, just continuing to ask why, and keep peeling back the layers of that onion. And when we do that, and was it Tony Robbins that may have said, the quality of our questions determines the quality of our life? I might be butchering that, but it's something along those lines.
Sounds good. If it's not his, it can be yours, because it's
okay.
so I'm good either way.
Perfect. But the main point being that it's applicable in both our professional lives as well as our personal lives, right? So here you're asking these types of questions, you come to a realization, and it almost stops you in your tracks, because you start thinking differently. And when we start thinking differently, we start seeing possibilities. We start seeing things differently. So continue down that path, because this is a really interesting one. And I want to make sure that our audience gets the part about asking the right questions and not just accepting something for what it is. It may not be broken, but we should still be asking the question, why? Is there something else we can do? Can we iterate? Can we do this differently?
Yeah, I had a phenomenal coach that I worked with and was part of this community, coach by the name of Rich Litvin, in this community 4PC that I was in. And we had agreements over expectations. We had agreements that we would read into the beginning of events, as a general kind of code and understanding of how we all agreed to show up in this community. And one of the things, and I know I'm going to kind of butcher this a little bit too, was seeking insight over agreement. So showing up, and I did a session in one of our communities today where at the beginning of it, because we were talking about money, we were talking about the stories we tell ourselves about money, and it was, just pulling at all different types of threads, and that, hey, there's no definitive here's the answer. This is an opportunity to be curious, and an opportunity to get curious about yourself and why you hang on to these stories. Why do you keep telling yourself these stories? I know they're yours, because if it's your thought, it's yours. And what part of you believes that that's an important thing? And to and for me, I'm a believer that every part of me is trying to serve me, even if it's not, which, to your point, like creates that curiosity internally, and not the judgment and the reaction. And do I always do that? Well, yeah, some days better than others, but coming back to what you were saying, the opportunity in every interaction to kind of fight and I feel like I'm doing it now, because I'm definitely checking in on the words I'm saying, and do I really believe this? Do I practice this? Am I to show up and be curious and not take the easy path. I kind of look at it like a path, like you're walking down this path, and there's all of a sudden this conversation. There's a sentence that comes out, and we can choose to go, I agree or disagree, which is kind of like, I'm going to sit on this side of the trail, or I'm going to sit on this side of the trail, and I'm stopped. Versus, you can ask a question externally or internally. You can ask the question to the person you're talking to, or you can say, that's interesting. What part of me feels the need to agree with that? What part of me, and is that serving me? Is that in alignment with what's really important to me? What is really important to me? Again, and so you can be pulling these questions with yourself or with someone else. Or I'm curious, like, when did you start believing that? Like, when did that become a thing for you? Does that still? I mean, these are questions I would ask anybody coaching or advising, not from a place, I don't want you to defend your thought or your belief. I just want you to get curious about, do you still want to own it? Part of you wants to own it. Do you want to, like, does this really support what you're doing? If it does, and you're cool with it, if you truly believe that, like, money does not grow on trees, that statement is factual, and I'm okay with it. Right, cool. I'm not going to fight you on it. I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise. I'm not here to convince or convert anybody. So it is that piece of curiosity. I think that is, and candidly, it is something that I will not raise my right hand and say that I commit to showing up every day. What I do know as a hardcore belief is that when I do show up that way, it opens so much more. It opens up so much more connection, understand. Oh my gosh, everything that cascades from there is amazing. I definitely aspire to do a much better job of that, because it's the quality of my life increases exponentially. The experience of my life increases exponentially when I can show up curious and just be with someone else.
Well, I'm right there with you. I agree with that statement 110% or more, if that's even possible. And first of all, I appreciate you being candid about that and readily admitting that you don't always show up that way. I think we have ideals that we shoot for, but we all also have to manage expectations. So can I be that way every day? I can probably get better at being that way, but do I fully arrive? That's still a question mark. But I think the one thing that you did say, that you recognize that when you are more curious, when you're asking those types of questions, when you're doing the inner work that's required, trying to understand, why am I either showing up a certain way? Why am I making decisions a certain way? Why do I feel a certain way about something? That's part of who you are, but Is that a storyline that you inherited? Is that a belief that was given to you? Why do you feel that way? Because once we start to understand those interesting nuances, the psychology behind that, we can start to accept what actually aligns with our goals, our purpose, what we're looking to accomplish, who we
Right.
want to be, and we can learn to either reframe or let go of those beliefs or whatever that happens to be that doesn't move us in that direction, that either holds us back, that keeps us stuck. You understand where I'm going with that?
Oh, I want, man, we're speaking the same language.
And I know that this is an area
I
that you touch on with your clients when you're coaching, when you're doing one-to-one work. And I want to go down that road a bit, but I'd love to get your thoughts on some of that work that you do for yourself before you're able to do that for others.
wow. So for me, it is, I mean, it's a combination of things. It is doing my best to have the what can feel like uncomfortable conversations that I don't necessarily want to have, whether that's, the two things that come to mind, the greatest discomfort and vulnerability is always going to be with my wife, and having a conversation with her about something that's bothering me, or something that's eating at me, or whatever. The next layer, so I'd say sometimes with my kids, probably I have a 9-year-old and a 26-year-old, so our conversations are vastly different. Uh, Probably more with the 26-year-old than I don't have a massive discomfort with where I'm at with what I'm currently tackling with a 9-year-old boy. That is subject to change when we hit the teenage years. Uh, um, and then there's certainly business partners, and actually one that comes up, and it's interesting as we talk about this, that when I'm truly honest with myself, it's those moments with clients where I feel like there is something that needs to be said, or a question that needs to be asked, and I may be a little uncomfortable in asking it. And I'm gonna look down at my notebook, because this happened the other day when we were talking. I was talking to a client. I could feel myself just getting. I was on with my other business partner. We're coaching this guy, and I'm like, I am getting so frustrated right now because I feel like this dude's just swirling and stuff. And I got to a point where I just kind of backed off in terms of saying anything. So I'm like, I know if I can feel it, I know it's, even though we're on Zoom, I know it's coming across. And I wrote down, I go, you do this same stuff with your business, and this is why you're getting so angry. And I was like, huh, yep. You're not upset with him. You're not frustrated with him. You're doing this exact same thing right now, and you know it. You know it. So I am curious, and I don't say that as an accolade to pat myself on the back. What question that begs for me is a similar one, and this is, I'll do my best to segue this and tie it back in. I am currently doing some work with a mobility coach. I have never done anything, like I've done endurance stuff. I consider myself a relatively strong dude. Like I've done a whole bunch of other kind of endurance type, not crazy stuff because that's a horrible language to use, but just different kind of challenges and adventures, that whether it's been orienteering, ultra marathon, stuff like that I just think would be just kind of push those boundaries. But I've never, I don't know how to go from sitting on my hands to moving my legs back to going to a handstand. I don't even know if I'll ever get there, but I'm fascinated to figure out how I can go from where I'm at now to there. So I'm doing this one exercise the other day, work out twice a week, and I'm rotating my knees in as I'm sitting in like a deep seated lunge, and I'm getting this level of mobility. And in the span of 10 reps going back and forth with my knees kind of moving in, I go from this very limited range of motion to almost getting my knee down on the ground. And there's a fascinating thing that happens where part of that is tightness that's loosening up. Part of it is an inner conversation I'm having with my body when I start to get pushback on something and go, hey, I get it. We don't have to go there if you're telling me that we shouldn't go there, but I'm not going to, some of that stupid stuff we used to do when we run 50 miles, that's not what we're doing today. So I'm not doing that to you. I just want to see if we can get a little bit further. And I said this to him afterwards, and he goes, oh my God, man, did you see where you went from that to that? I said, yeah. And at the beginning, I didn't see moving my knee that was going maybe 15 degrees to now going almost 45. I didn't see that as a possibility. I am fascinated where else in my life right now I don't see a possibility. And I said, that changed in like 30 seconds, dude. Changed in 30 seconds. And it wasn't me hammering through. I was never uncomfortable. I had a different conversation with myself. I'm like, so again, pan out. Okay, where else can we do that? I mean, the answer is everywhere. So where else would we benefit from doing that? And what does that look like in my relationship with my wife? Where does that look like? I said this to her the other day. I go, the thing that I want most is we've had some really cool conversations over the past, 2 weeks. How do we have more of those? Like, what does that look like? What's that look like for you? What's that look like for you in terms of how I'm showing up? What does it feel like? And again, full transparency, it's very easy to step back and get very curious with myself, like, what was I doing? What was I? Whereas there's an enormous opportunity with the person that you want to co-create this moment with to say, hey, what'd that look and feel like for you? First of all, asking the question, did you feel the same way about those conversations that I did? Let's just check in on that. And then kind of move over from there. So it's just fascinating to me how all of these things, it is almost an impossibility when you start to cross over into this space of focusing on being versus the doing, all cascading into all aspects of your life.
I love that. And I love the types of questions that you're asking your wife as an example, and having those uncomfortable conversations, but where it leads and the fact that it creates a ripple effect. And that in the example you gave with the mobility coach, where you didn't necessarily visualize or see that you could accomplish this, yet as you became more flexible, as you continued to do the work, as you were held accountable, you began to realize your story changed. You went from,
sure,
I can't do this, or I'm not the type of person who can do this, to I can do this, and I'm showing myself that I can do this. What more can I do? Right? Because now momentum starts to build. It becomes a bit more exciting. You start to see the possibilities. You start to realize that there really is more that I can accomplish when I'm putting the work in, right? When I'm intentional about it, which is exactly what you were doing in those moments. But then what's really cool is you took it, expanded it further, and said, well, if I can do that here in this, what I'll call a relatively simple exercise, not easy, relatively simple exercise,
sure,
if I can do it there, where else can I do this? Where else can I apply this in other areas of my life and business? So I want to ask you something about beliefs, because, as we've been talking through some of the information that you've been sharing, beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about our business capabilities, et cetera, potential, all of those things, the beliefs play a massive role, right? What is something that you believed about yourself early on in life that you later discovered wasn't true?
There are two things that come up, and one is later in life and not so recently, and one is later in life, like a couple days ago. So I'll do the later in life a while back, and it was a story. I was always I was always the kid, first, second, third grade, who both my friend Josh and I would be the last two who were picked for PE. Most people would look at me now and not believe that story. But it was, I mean, and it was a well-deserved point in the selection process because we were not adding much of anything. If we were playing dodgeball, we were there to basically take a hit for the team. That was about it. And sorry, Josh, but this is true too. What's interesting is I came to realize about 2 years back how much that small story, that small trauma, continued to play in life. How I wouldn't put myself out there to fully say to a client who I can see, a potential client that I can see that I can help, hey, here's what I see, here's what we can do, here's what we can do together, because they're not going to pick me. Where I will very, very, in a really crafty way, because I am a fascinating dude to coach, because I will watch myself not answer your question when I'm being coached. And I need coaches. I tell coaches this to begin with, like, I want to tell you what's going to happen, and I need you to hold me accountable. And sometimes in the moment, I'll be like, oh my God, I totally skirted past that question. Did you see what I did there? That was pretty cool. I totally got us off track. If this was not a question I wanted to answer, I guarantee you I'd be doing it right now. It's second nature for me. But what I came to realize through a couple of experiences where I would watch myself almost having that story come up, and then kind of reconciling it around like, hey, this is not the case. This isn't the case at all. I can see how it downstream, this is like literally what happens in like a nanosecond now is when I feel it coming up, I'm going back in time and I'm having a conversation with myself when I was 6 and put my arm around little Kevin and going, hey man, that sucked. Not what this is. I need you to stop looking at that and focus on opportunities, potential. That's what we need to do, because it's just energy. That's all it is. And I'm creating it. And part of me is creating it in service of me, even though it's not serving me. It's trying to keep me safe. Because I do believe, a bigger belief that this frames under is no longer believing that, like, you got to fight fear, you got to punch through, you got to drive on, you got to, like, no, I don't believe that I need to be at odds with myself. I don't believe that part of Kevin wakes up every morning and goes, oh, how can we screw this dude over today? So like self-sabotage, I just don't buy it. I do believe that there's part of me creating these things that are no longer serving me, maybe we never did, like that like, because if that's a problem that can be solved. Like, hey man, if the thing is you don't want to be picked last for dodgeball, get good at dodgeball. It's not rocket science, it's dodgeball. I just don't get hit by the ball. Do you like getting hit by the ball? No. So just work harder to avoid it. Clearly you don't mind it that much because you're really good at getting hit by the ball. So there's that one, and that actually led into another one, which was, I believed for the longest period of time that, like, if I got bigger and stronger, nobody would ever mess with me. And then what I came to realize was there's another space that you move into when, if there's another alpha that comes into the room, and I don't consider myself an alpha, they're going to come over to you first because they need to show everybody else that they can go after the dude that's just as big as them. And I'm like, I don't understand this. I thought something magical was going to happen. Like, if I just got bigger and stronger and I could run faster and I could lift more, and I'm like, that I'd be such a badass that, like, nobody would ever mess with me. Nope. It actually resulted in more altercations. So there is that one. The other one that just happened recently totally escaped me. That is so fascinating.
That's okay. You're not trying to purposely divert that one, which
I
I appreciate.
But then there's part of me wondering, because I know it'll come back to me. There's part of me wondering, like, is there a part of you that really doesn't want to share that? Which is not the kid. Yeah. Anyway,
that's okay.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for sharing the
sure.
first story, and I think for any of us, understanding those beliefs that we have and reconciling with those beliefs. We had them at one point. They may have served us at one point. Whether it was positively or negatively, but the self-awareness behind that belief system. And then as we move through life and we have greater experiences, maybe pick up some more wisdom, we begin to realize that that thing that I believed about myself, whatever it was, and in my case, there were plenty of things that I believed that were not positive things, but absolutely held me back. Things such as that I wasn't good enough to do XYZ, that I was always sitting in the very back of the room because I was afraid to answer a question, that I didn't want to be put in the spotlight. I didn't want to be made fun of. I mean, there were all kinds of things that I told myself about myself that really were just made up stories, right? But the challenge with it is until we acknowledge it, until we realize what it is that is having an impact and an effect on the way that we show up to the world, it has an effect on the decisions we make, the types of relationships that we build, has so many different variables to it. But until we acknowledge and then begin to do the work to dismantle or change that storyline, until that time comes, we're still living in that same story. It still continues to swirl.
100%. And it is for like the two flagship programs that we currently run. They both start out in the same place with this phase that we refer to as the personal operating system, which is, simplified. It is getting to the core of those beliefs, understanding whether they serve you, don't serve you, understanding energetically how you're showing up with those beliefs running, and whether you're aware that they're running or not in the background, and kind of where you're creating experiences with and for other people, where that's coming from. And then the success cycle, which totally ties in with beliefs, right? The beliefs are dictating the level of action you're going to take and determining the results you're going to get, which in turn are either going to, feed or starve the belief. And a large part of this, why we refer to it as a personal operating system, is it's much like you're talking about, like what the J 1.0 isn't necessarily what J needs for 1.1 or 1.2. And it's not, and what I will tell people as they come into this and remind them of is that what we're really doing in that first phase is it's not like we solve for it and it's done. What we're doing is we're starting to create space, create awareness, create intentionality, as you brought up, to continue, because you're going to pull at these things, and there's a lot going on in there. Because particularly if you decide you're going to start this work and you're starting it, like I'm getting ready to be 53, you want to start it for the first time at 53, settle in, man, and get really patient with yourself, because there's a lot of stuff to pull at. And this too, it comes back to why, like, don't be at odds with yourself with it. Like it's there. Get curious about it. Because if you're going to fight yourself, guarantee you can only drive on adrenaline so long with that, which is really what you're going to be pushing against. It's not going to be sustainable. But that, for me, and as you've said repeatedly, or at least this is what I'm hearing you say, every level of growth requires that. So unless you want to go through, going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, unless you want to go through these things where it's like, oh my God, I'm having a crisis, I need to pivot, I've got to make these massive changes. You can be doing these things incrementally all the time, so that when you realize, wait a minute, this thing, whatever it is, job, relationship, business, situation, whatever, it no longer serves me to do it this way. I want to come at it a different way. Who do I need to be? Who do I get to be? What stories are going to support showing up that way? Maybe there's some things you need to change, add in, get rid of. Again, come back to an operating system. And this, for me, has been really helpful, because you've got two things that are running at the same time. You've got your logic, and then you've got the intuition. They're operating on two totally different planes. And you've got to feel your way into some of this stuff. And when logic tries to take over and completely drive the train, having something like that, for me at least, relieves a little bit of pressure to go, okay, this makes perfect sense why we're going to drop down here and not completely lean in on what logic is telling us and what, quote, makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. recognizing that the two are at play, but they're both necessary at the same time, and
100%.
recognizing when I'm going to defer to one versus the other, take information from both, right? Pay
Yeah.
attention to both, but understand what is driving my decisions. And something you mentioned that made me think of this. I wrote about this recently within the past couple of weeks, and I'm as transparent as I can possibly be. So when I'm writing what's on my heart, what's in my mind at that moment. And this isn't the first time I've come to this realization, but I readily admit that I am not the person yet, or there is more that I need to learn, more skills I need to acquire to become the person who I know I can be, to be able to accomplish the next things that are on my list of aspirations and goals. So as an example, I map out, I have a view of where I'm going and where I want to grow. But I know that today I can't get to that place without more experiences, different relationships, greater skills, etc. Right? That's a level of self-awareness that I had to work on, do a lot of deep work on, because otherwise I was in a state of complete frustration for a long time. That why am I not, progressing? What's holding me back, right? But I didn't have the self-awareness to ask better questions. And one of the things we've been talking about here is the ability to take a step back and ask those difficult questions, right? Have more difficult conversations, have the conversations that are going to draw out the meaningful meat on the bone, if you will, that you can actually use to progress and to move forward and take action on and do something with. So it just, I bring that up because it sparked something in my mind about honestly assessing where we are, both personally and professionally, and being real about it, right? Because the only way that we can actually put a plan of action in place, the only way that we can actually do something that's actually going to move us in the right direction, is to know what our starting point is, have an idea where we want to go. We may not have it all worked out. More than likely, we won't have it all worked out. But what we can see is at least the vision of where we want to go, and then take the appropriate steps to get there. Understand where the gaps are, and then begin to fill those gaps.
Yeah, there's so much in there. There's I there are a couple things that come up for me. One is, and this is highly tactical, but it's exceptionally impactful for me. I was sharing with my daughter this morning. We meet for coffee once a week, and we were walking around, and she was talking through some work that she's been doing, and self work, and a process she has. And I was like, that's really cool. Do you mind if I share something that this has worked for me? Like, try it, don't, like, whatever, mileage may vary, right? I said, the mirror for me is a fascinating tool when I will have these things I'm telling myself in my head, and then I lock eyes and I say out loud what the thing is, the story I'm telling myself. One of these had to do with fitness lately, and I finally go, I just out loud, I go, dude, I am so tired of hearing you talk about this. Do it or don't do it. Just like, shut up. Like, seriously, if you were, and I'm thinking, like, if I was this anybody else in my life, I'd be like, seriously, this again? Like, if you want it, do it. If I can help support you, let me know. I'm so tired of hearing about this. So tired. And I just kind of chuckled, and I was like, cool. Like, it's either important to you or it's not important to you. But stop saying, oh, tomorrow we're gonna. No, you're not. You know how long you've been saying that? You are so bullshit. Like, you're so full of it, man. So, and it's that in and of itself, I think, like, having candid conversations with yourself. And as I say this, I'm like, I don't do that anywhere near enough. And I've now come to notice how many times I'm in, and I don't know if this will land for you or not, how many times I'm in the bathroom, maybe I'm getting ready in the morning, I'm shaving, whatever, I'm looking in the mirror, but I am not really looking in the mirror. Like I am not locking eyes with myself. I am looking at whatever I need to do. But the eyes are not, they're not. And when I do that, I can feel it. I can feel it. It's like, oh, hey, you. We can't hide, can we? Nope. Can't. It's
Yeah,
really uncomfortable. It's super uncomfortable.
it
Highly
is,
recommend
and
it for everyone.
it's a great point, and the mirror analogy, right? Holding up a mirror, or when you hold up a mirror for someone else, that's a very challenging and uncomfortable place to be at times, but a necessary place to be. And it's until we've had that experience that we can really begin to go deeper, unpack those feelings that we have, really look at who we are, how we're showing up to the world, how we show up for our business partners, our friends, our spouse, and really looking at that. And, one of the things that you said a few minutes ago was that there were a couple questions that you had asked a former, I believe it was someone that you had worked with at the
Right.
time. I'm looking at my notes here, which, by the way, I am taking notes, and I would encourage all of you to do exactly the same thing, because again, this is about following curiosity. And so you had asked a couple of questions. One was, and I kind of wrote them down as power questions. When you think of me, what do you think of? Right. That was one of the questions that you asked. The other one was, when you would call me, right, to solve a problem, when you know that I'm the person who can solve that problem, what is that problem? What do you think my skills are that allow me to solve those bigger problems? Right? Something along those lines. But asking those types of questions, getting feedback from others to find out more about, how do you show up as a leader? How do you show up as a husband? How do you show up as a spouse? How do you show up as a business partner?
For
Right?
sure.
Getting that feedback is so very valuable, and not being afraid to ask for it and ask the questions, but let your ego go, because when you do have those kinds of conversations and you're asking those questions if you create the right space for it, you're going to hear some things that are going to surprise you. They're going to
so it's
surprise you.
so it's interesting you say that. So there are two ways that I use this now, and one on a more regular basis with clients going through one of our programs. That's a little bit of a, it's not a little bit, it's very much a visioning process. And the other one is one that I did for myself a few years back. So I was at a crossroads with my business, and I had a handful of clients that I love, still do. And some of them I'm still working with, other ones I'm not, and the ones that I'm not, I still talk to on a regular basis. It's for me the kind of relationship that I want to have with the people who I'm working with, and I'm invested in what it is that they're doing. And I would say to myself all the time, like, man, if I could just like clone you guys, I would be in heaven. And I realized everything I was trying to do to find more people like them, I can go down the demographic, and I could sort of touch on the psychographic, but I realized the psychographic's coming from my perspective. I've never stopped to ask them, like, I know what it feels like when we're working together for me. I don't know what it feels like for you. I'm assuming it's good because you come back and like it seems to be working for you. So I'm guessing it's good. So we got on Zoom, and I said, do you mind if I just ask you a bunch of questions? I literally said to him, I go, I know what this feels like for me. I would like to just get curious and ask you some questions, what it feels like for you. And the reason I want to do Zoom, if it's easier to turn the screen off, whatever, and we're close enough that I didn't feel like it was going to be an issue, but like, however you want to do this, but I want to record this. And then I recorded it. I never went back and watched it, but I had it transcribed. And the transcription for me it's a better way to then instead of getting caught up in what I said, how I said it, that whole dimensionality of it, like listening to the conversation is very different. If we go back and we listen to this conversation versus being in it, you have a whole totally different experience. But reading it was different too. Like I could start to notice how many times now I read something like, man, you like asked that question a lot, or even more powerful, hey, they keep saying that. What is it about this language? What does that mean to them? So to ask some follow-up questions. In the visioning piece, we do this where I'm on with a business partner of mine. Somebody's asking questions. Somebody's asking clarifying questions. The client is answering stuff. We are recording it and we're putting out a transcription. And then they're able to go back and look at how they've answered things. And then we're also able, then we have a follow-up where we're getting curious about, curious, you're laying out this vision for your business and for your life. And you're telling me how much this is all about balance with your family. Help me understand what your vision is for your family. Because when I go back and I read this, there's not a lot there. And quite, or like you've got a very clear vision on like where you want to be and how you're going to feel when you're over here, but we're not talking about how you want to feel right now. All these things. And it becomes an interesting way to like cut through the BS of the revisionist stuff that we're going to tell ourselves, but oh my God, that felt so great to have that conversation, or oh my God, I had such great insight, and then be able to pan back out and look at what happened and just take it down to that singular dimension of reading those words and realize, wow, I said this a lot. If you do something that I used to do a lot more than I do now, be self-deprecating in my humor, realize, dude, you're just trying to beat people to the punch. There's somewhere along the way you've told yourself, like, if you take a shot at yourself first, then nobody else can. That's not like, oh, by the way, you're letting people know how it's okay to talk to you because you're talking to yourself that way.
I'm going to have to try that myself with the transcription because it does create a different experience.
It's fascinating. I stumbled onto it. I did it because I didn't want to go back and listen to myself or watch myself. It was not a stroke of brilliance on the front end. It was an economy and a like, oh my God, I hate my voice. So I don't want to listen to myself. But as I went through it, I was like, this is a totally different experience. And then to have clients do it and have them read it and go, oh my God, here's what I noticed out of this. And they're able to get curious about it, and they're getting curious and seeing things and then sharing things that they didn't. I can't recommend it enough for anybody because I'm sure it's applicable in a variety of ways that I can't even see.
Well, it is on my to-do list right now. So I thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
So, as we begin to wrap up our conversation, it's amazing how fast these conversations go, but we're in it, which is excellent. And I appreciate you being so candid and allowing the conversation to flow in a lot of different directions, very interesting directions. I would love it if you would share a challenge with our audience. What would you challenge them to do?
So given what our company does, which is, helping people through the process of creating what's next in their lives, a question that comes up a lot for people is, I'm not really sure what I want to do. I'm a firm believer that we all know what we want to do. You've got everything that you need. You just need to figure out how to tap into that. Maybe trust yourself a little bit more. Maybe get reconnected to part of you, or connect to part of you maybe you've never been connected to. I don't know. It's not prescriptive. There's not one path for everyone. There are frameworks to help kind of pull at these things. I'm fascinated by a couple of questions. One is when you start to think about what you would like life to look like, some things you would like to do. Those questions can become kind of easy and a little pedantic, but we always find this place where we get up to an edge and we go, that would be great, but that to me is when we're starting to get on the edge of what's really interesting. So paying attention to that. And when one of the responses that come back is, and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of where you want to be next, a very easy thing to say is, well, that's going to be too hard. It's going to be too hard. It's going to be too difficult. What if it was easy? What does easy look like? I've just gone through this with retooling a business that was successful by all financial accounts, but I was totally miserable. And I'm coming off a day doing something that 3 years ago, if I had had the day I had today, I'd be like, oh my God, I just want to go to sleep. I'm probably going to have 2 bourbons. And then I'm going to tell myself I'm going to get up to work out tomorrow morning, but I'm not going to. I'm definitely tired. It's been a long day, but like I was just being me. I got to be me. I chose to be me all day long. And it's kind of cool. I'm sort of checking myself because I don't really feel like I worked today. Huh. That's an interesting story.
Yes, it is.
Why is easy versus hard equate to getting something done versus not? If you're truly operating in your zone of genius, it should flow. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be challenges, but it's not, you're not pushing a boulder up a hill. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
That sounds like we need to ask ourselves a couple more questions.
Yes.
So with that said, I appreciate you sharing that challenge. And for all of you that are watching and listening right now, ask yourself that question. And when you get to that big one, that would be great, but explore that. Definitely explore that one. So here is my final question to you. And by the way, we have all of your social handles, your websites, all the great places where we can go to connect with you and consume your content and learn more about the different businesses that you're involved in. We'll go ahead and put that in the show notes. But as far as the final question is concerned, what is the most difficult decision that you've had to make in the pursuit of who you've become?
Hands down, getting divorced when I was 31. Hands down. And 100% because of not knowing what that was going to impact it was going to have on my daughter. And feeling like I was failing for years.
Thank you for sharing that. And Kevin, thank you. I appreciate you being here today. Thank you for spending time with us on Business Minds Coffee Chat. Thank you for going deep in the conversation, being candid, and just being real. I appreciate it. I appreciate you sharing of your wisdom and your knowledge and helping all of us better understand who you are and better understand how to navigate different areas of the life that we all live. So I'm grateful for you. Thank you so very much.
Hey, thank you, Jay. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And for all of you, thank you very much for watching and listening. And I do have a favor to ask. Would you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review? We would greatly appreciate that, especially on Apple Podcasts. That helps this podcast continue to grow. It allows us the opportunity to expand our reach as well. So would you do that for us? That would be wonderful. And to enjoy more episodes, all you need to do is visit jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.